Welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I am Kirat Attar, Associate Editor at CIO, and I will be your host for this episode. Our guest today is Joe DiFonzo, Chief Information Officer at Sabre Corporation. Joe, it is such a pleasure to have you with us for this episode of CIO Leadership Live.
Pleasure to meet you as well, Karat.
Thank you. Joe, very excited for this conversation. Let us get right into it. Can you tell us a little bit about Sabre Corporation and your role and responsibilities as the CIO of the organization?
Sure. Sabre is one of the world's largest providers of technology to the travel industry. We support airlines and hotels and travel agencies, both virtual or online travel agencies, as well as the normal what we call brick and mortar travel agencies around the world. We provide the systems, for example, that help airlines perform their daily operations, their planning and scheduling, their routes, their inventory, their shopping and sales, payments, even all the way through reservations and boarding and departure control. Similarly for hotels, managing their inventory, managing their pricing, managing their reservations, and even managing hotel operations. So when customers come in and actually arrive for the stay and how they manage the hotel properties, et cetera. And then for travel agencies, right, we basically provide all of that travel content from airlines and hotels, as well as rental cars and cruises and rail and so on to the travel agents, both again online and brick and mortar travel agents, to allow them to service their customers, right, and sell them complete packages of travel and manage those things as they go through the planning and execution of the actual trip. So it's a rather a large business. We've been in business since the 1960s, as originally as a part of American Airlines, and then split out around the year 2000 into a separate company. And we basically serve thousands of other companies around the world as one of the largest B2B travel technology providers.
Thank you so much for that introduction. What a massive scope of the organization to be around since the 60s and to operate independently for like since the 2000s. So that's more than 2 decades. Having been a pioneer in the travel technology and the whole space for so long, um, the travel industry has seen a huge shift. People's attitudes, people's intentions to travel, business, and traveling for pleasure, all of them combined. What are some of the most significant challenges you've witnessed in the travel industry recently? And how has Sabre's technology evolved to adapt to them or address them?
Sure. There have been many big changes and challenges recently. Obviously, probably the biggest thing that stands out recently is the challenge that was introduced by the COVID pandemic and how
Absolutely.
that impacted the entire travel industry from top to bottom, really, as many people were totally prevented from traveling. There were lots of new travel restrictions that were put in place. Obviously, had a major impact on all of our customers from a financial perspective, as well as on companies like Sabre and Sabre. So we're still dealing with the kind of the after effects of that even today. But it did highlight some things in the industry that needed to change in terms of the way we think about cost efficiency and the way we manage business and the way we do sales, et cetera. Outside of that, just the general march of technology and the challenge constantly of how can companies in the travel space use technology more effectively to sell and service their customers. The management of information that's becoming very key now as well. How do we use information to better serve customers? We'll probably talk about this later, but the rise of machine learning and AI technologies and how that can provide value across the spectrum of services provided by companies like Sabre, as well as by airlines and travel agencies and hoteliers directly. How do they expose that technology to their customers? There's a general trend as well in terms of traveler preferences. People have gotten more used to doing things online and doing a lot of self-service on the internet. So how do we find the right balance of supporting that, as well as at the same time providing the kind of service level that customers expect when they're buying, just sometimes very expensive products related to travel. So many things around that, and then finally, just industry dynamics are changing. Specifically, the way that hotels and airlines want to sell their services, the way they want to differentiate their content. No more is it just a seat on an airplane and 20 or so fare
Yes.
classes, right? There's a lot of very customized things now that these companies want to sell, and they need that information to come across in the content that's provided by systems like ours. So many dynamic things in the industry. It's very exciting and challenging time to be in it right now, and it
True.
keeps us very busy in terms of new development and innovation at the company.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more because also I think from a customer perspective, the way one would approach traveling and the sort of nature of there's a brick and mortar office that you plan weeks in advance. The nature of travel truly has changed because now one could be expected to travel at a moment's notice because the world is more global, and I'm sure that
That's right.
as dynamics have changed, people have changed, intentions have changed, so has the travel industry had to catch up. Uh, so I'd like to talk about how digital transformation is able to support the new phase of, how travel evolves. Emerging technologies like AI, machine learning, analytics have become sort of the tools through which an industry can stabilize itself while also scaling up into immense growth. So can you talk to us about how you utilize these technologies to improve the travel experience for, the B2B space that you're operating in?
Sure, sure, absolutely. The interesting thing about Sabre, and one of the things that attracted me to it, is the rich history of the company. If you really think about it, we were the first SaaS company on the planet because what we did was we enabled the digitization of the travel business. Before Sabre, the airlines used to basically run big offices, and they would have all of these like index cards and lazy
Oh,
Susan devices to track, what they were selling in terms of inventory and planes. They had big chalkboards that kept track of airline inventory and how many seats were available in certain classes on
oh,
every plane. And it was a big, right, obviously a complicated problem. And as the airline industry grew, that was unmaintainable. Right? So Sabre really helped the first transition, right, into the digitalization of the travel business, and then we move forward from there. If you think about the very first instance of Sabre, we literally like replacing IBM terminals in travel agencies and providing that technology to those companies. Now, of course, everything is delivered over the internet, right? They're using PCs and other devices to access their services. As we move forward now, it's all become about, web technologies and web APIs and more advanced interface mechanisms, more real-time integration of services, much more complicated APIs than we've ever had before, enabling really integration into almost any step of the value chain in travel, the travel business, from shopping to purchase to fulfillment, right, of that travel service that's being delivered. So many changes along the way. Today, like, obviously, we're seeing all of the different mobile apps that are being supported. But
yes.
what's interesting is behind all of these changes in the way that users are interacting with this technology and with this content that we provide through our systems, the kind of core thing that's still there at the heart of it, right, is that content and is all of the business functionality that we're providing around that content so that the travel services can be sold and fulfilled. So there's it's a very different thing, for example, than comparing it to an e-commerce site like an Amazon or something like that, because with an Amazon, you see a product you like, there's a price, you order it, it comes to your house. With travel, right, there's so many rules, right? The prices of things aren't fixed. They have to be dynamically computed, taxes and things like that. There are all kinds of restrictions and communications. You think about it, when you go to check in for a flight, we have to communicate with government agencies and do security background checks and
Yes.
all kinds, right? All of these things come together in so many different systems as you travel through, from going from your, mobile device all the way through the airport, and how you can actually get through security and check on a plane and so on and so forth. So there's many steps in this. I'm rambling on a bit, but the point of it is, right, it's a very complex value chain and it's constantly evolving. Now we're starting to see, more technologies like biometrics and things like that. We're starting
True.
to see, again, a lot more data-driven artificial intelligence coming into the flow, whereas before a lot of the business rules, if you will, were somewhat hard-coded and then slightly dynamic through like rules processing engines and things like that. Now everything is becoming very, very data-driven, and we have to now express that through all of our products as well. And at the same time all of that's going on, we're dealing with much more interesting like regulation. from governments and the industry about this. So, for example, right, there are all kinds of new privacy rules like the GDPR and many
Yes.
other things that are going on in other countries and localities that actually sort of restrict our ability to use information in certain contexts without
Yes.
complete approval from the customer and so on and so forth. So it's very nuanced, very balanced, but again very dynamic, and it continues to change daily. But basically, what it really all boils down to is the continued desire from companies that sell travel products to serve their customers better, to compete more effectively, to provide the best products at the best prices. And that's what we're helping them do every day.
Absolutely, and that is very clear because for an organization, for an airlines, there'll be hundreds of flights taking off in a week. But for a customer, that's probably the only flight they're going to take that year. So their experience is so a secret, frankly, for lack of a better word, that they expect everything to be in place, and that places a lot of demand on you as does on Sabre as it does on the airline.
Absolutely. And there's also many different types of customers and many different types of trips. So though your example is typical of a consumer type relationship, when you think about business travelers, it's a very different dynamic, right? They're much higher
Absolutely.
value to the company, whether it's an airline or hotel. They have all kinds of loyalty programs, which we help them support, for example, in our technology. There's a much different dynamic about how those customers are dealt with, right, by those travel providers. And now we're starting to see what we're calling mixed or leisure travel, right, where people are merging together business and leisure travel
Oh,
at the same time.
leisure.
There's just yeah, and so there's
Oh,
an especially big uptick on this, right, since COVID, right, with people traveled less, or people
yeah.
sort of got what they call revenge travel after the pandemic ended, or catch up
Yes.
on vacations they couldn't take, et cetera.
Mm.
So it's again a very dynamic element, even from the way we just even look at customers in the marketplace.
Absolutely. I think workations also become a part of that, where people are like, I do have the flexibility to travel, but my work is coming with me, and I might fall in the same category.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Uh, so I think we do. I mean, I'm getting from you a sense that you absolutely know that the customer has a lot of expectations, and especially in business travel, where it's more than just about a trip, it's about certain goals being met. And even through the conversation, the picture that I get when I imagine, somebody taking a flight taking off, is also the fact that people have a lot of grievances crop up at the airport. They don't get their luggage, they're complaining about something. They've traveled with pets. So the industry is highly dynamic. So even with a lot of digitization, the person to plane interaction, it's quite a dynamic industry. There are disruptions, there are last minute changes, something that the customer might not
Mhm.
anticipate. So how does Sabre ensure agility and resilience in its technology infrastructure to deal with uncertainties that might be unforeseen for the airline as well as for the customer?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, and it's actually something we spend a lot of energy on. And there are two levels of answer to that question, so I'll give you a brief answer to both levels.
Yeah, yeah.
First of all, at the top, right, the functional level, right, we have a lot of very specific business logic to deal with disruptions, whatever they may be. For the airlines, that's a much more complicated problem than for hoteliers, but we do it for both, and also for travel agencies, because you can imagine. For example, I'm here in Florida. We've recently just had two hurricanes here. Whenever those
Yes.
things happen, right, many flights get canceled, thousands of flights get canceled or rescheduled, and we have to reaccommodate, right, all of the passengers. So there's a huge amount of business logic around that. How do we do that effectively? How do airlines, move or create new flights dynamically? How do we reassign passengers so they get the right kind of product? If they were booked in a first class seat, do they get booked again in a first class seat? If they were booked in a business class seat, and so on and so forth,
Yeah.
timing of flights, et cetera, et cetera. So many elements of this are involved. And underneath all of that, then, is our technology. And so we've been spending, and I haven't talked about this yet, but one of the big things that's been happening at Sabre is over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been undertaking a massive technological transformation activity. And we partnered with Google. We announced in 2020 a 10-year relationship with Google. Since we started that, we have migrated almost all of our technology footprint into Google Cloud, more than 90% already. And we got a little less than 10% in some other cloud infrastructures. But we moved pretty much our entire business to the cloud, with some very small exceptions. Over 99% of our compute and storage capacity is in cloud infrastructure today. But that lets us be very dynamic in terms of when we have these disruptions. One of the things that happens on the technology side is we have to deal with unexpected demand, right, of compute power, of
Yes.
processing power, right, dealing with all of these new database updates to deal with these crises that happen, that where you basically have a lot more volume, right, than you expect on a normal day. So that cloud infrastructure essentially lets us dynamically expand our capacity for processing. And then as we deal with the crisis and it goes away and we're back to normal, it kind of shrinks back down to where it needs to be. So it lets us be a lot more agile and dynamic than we were ever able to be in the past, where when you had the fixed infrastructure and physical data centers, right, you were sometimes limited by how much capacity you could provide. So we can provide much better service now because essentially we can scale up on demand and process a lot faster for these exceptional circumstances that you just talked about.
Thank you so much. Definitely, I think the crux is that if you've got the technology to handle it, then you've got a better chance of being able to deal with it. Otherwise, yeah, things can revert to the old system that you mentioned, the chalkboard writing. Of
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. Moving a little bit from the digital infrastructure side to something that has been under scrutiny for for the travel industry a lot, and that is sustainability.
Hmm.
There's often the rhetoric of individuals have a certain responsibility towards the environment, but there is also a certain responsibility with corporations, and airlines seem to be at the forefront of that scrutiny. Sustainability has become an important factor because of these conversations. Firstly, I'd like to know, is sustainability an important metric that Sabre, looks at when planning out, charting out the business? And are there any sustainability initiatives that have been incorporated in technology to support greener travel operations?
Absolutely, and that's a major focus for us right now. Matter of fact, you can review our own sustainability report. We have an ESG report that's out there now that was recently released that should give you a lot more insight. But I can give you a kind of three levels that we think about it today. First of all, we have the concern about sustainability as we work with our airline customers and how they actually plan their routes, right? And understand like how they assign their inventory, the types of planes they fly over, what routes, how much carbon emissions come from that, right? How to maximize their, or I should say minimize really their carbon footprint as they go through that process. Because we provide software that helps airlines basically plan out their route maps and do that most efficiently and effectively. And of course, there's a direct correlation right between the reduction in carbon emissions as well as the reduction of the cost for the airlines to operate those flights. So it's generally a good thing, right? Where they burn less fuel, right? They create less carbon footprint, and therefore they can actually improve their own cost efficiency as well as being better for the environment. So that's one of the major ways. And another way, we've partnered with Google as part of the sustainability initiative to provide carbon emission estimates as customers are actually shopping for flights. So now in the Sabre front end and all of our APIs and all of our UIs, you can actually see carbon emission estimates for every flight that's offered as customers are selecting travel. So now they can take this into account and say, let me take this flight instead of that flight because I have a lower carbon footprint if I do it. And they can then compare that against the cost of the flights and the time of the flights and see what's most appropriate for them. But now they have this extra piece of information that they can use to manage their own carbon emissions. And then at the company level, we're doing a lot. And actually, the partnership with Google is also key to this because in our elimination of now like 19 data centers we have closed since moving into the cloud with the partnership with Google and with Google's focus and Google Cloud's focus, right, on basically net zero emissions. We are working with them essentially to drive our own carbon footprint down as a company. So all the processing we do now is getting much more green, if you will, because we're partnered with Google and we're basically kind of piggybacking on their efforts to drive their cloud from more renewable energy sources and lower carbon energy sources as we go forward. And that trend will just continue. So this is a good element of the partnership from a Sabre perspective.
Thank you for that. Definitely, sounds like that's a long journey. The
Mhm.
way sustainability initiatives play out. So, uh, kudos to you for making all of the steps in this direction. Uh, Joe, my final question to you in this interview is, I think the future of travel is something that one can wonder about, because it's a little bit different from, other technologies like when you e-commerce, etc. That's changed the paradigm completely. And, so much so that there might be shops and etc. that have shut down because the warehouse and the delivery system can get things to a person right at the doorstep. But travel is different, because if somebody wants to go to Paris, Paris doesn't come to your doorstep. You do have to go to Paris. So,
Mhm.
just given that perspective, what are the key trends or innovations do you believe that can change the future of travel technology or traveling as we look at it? And how is Sabre positioning itself to stay ahead of the curve?
Sure. Well, I think that there are some elements that will be major changes as we go forward. I mean, certainly, again, the rise of sort of big data and analytics coupled with machine learning and artificial intelligence will really help drive a more integrated travel experience for customers, as well as when we think about the process of travel. There's sort of the ideation stage, right? They want to go somewhere. How do I get help with that? This the planning stage. Okay, now that I've
Mm,
decided I want to go somewhere, how do I actually get all the reservations, and how do I know exactly where I should stay, and what trains I should take, or what
mm.
planes I should, what
So help the
those types of
plan,
things.
helping the plan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then once you're actually executing, right, once you're on the trip, right, then you can think about how can this information technology help me have a better experience. So not only dealing with disruptions and things like that, but also like automatically integrating things like, okay, well, all right, my plane now is ran into headwinds and I'm going to be an hour late. Okay, well, maybe it can automatically arrange the car pickup for me to take me to the airport to come now
Mm,
a little bit later because it knows, or a little bit earlier, et cetera. Let the hotel know I'll need a later arrival, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of tie things together for me. And then also, when you think about all of the ancillary types of things that you do outside of just the hotel or the train or the plane, okay, the symphony is in town this week. Would you like a ticket if you have interest in that, right? Or there's a sporting event like a soccer game or something like that. Would you like that? Or a dinner reservation at a certain restaurant that you might like,
mm.
right? So knowing the traveler's profile, their past history, their likes and dislikes, you can kind of stitch all that information together and then use that right in real time to assist the traveler in improving the outcome right of their journey, helping them have a better experience. Of course, it's a fine line between
Yeah.
how much help you're giving versus how annoying you might be, right? So
Intrusion. Yeah.
that's something that's going to be an adjustable thing for each traveler. But I think that's a big element of it. And obviously, along with all of that, right, is the evolution of the way that people interface with this technology. So again, the mobile devices in the future, we start thinking about things like augmented reality and smart glasses and so on and so forth, just making that whole experience more seamless. And you can imagine now going, they're already doing technologies with biometrics and things like that, where you can imagine going on an entire trip, not having to have any kind of physical boarding cards or physical passports, and everything just sort of is completely digitized, right? You have your mobile device, you have your smartwatch, et cetera. And basically you can do everything you need on the trip from end to end, without a lot of that legacy technology and paper and things that you could lose, right? Or have trouble with. So there are many, many elements of that evolution. And then finally, there's just the whole evolution of the business, right? And how do we help all of these companies work together more effectively, right? The travel agencies, the hotels, the airlines, et cetera, so that they can optimize not only the experience for their customer, but also their relationships with each other, right? There might be a lot of new revenue sharing opportunities that they might have with each other around how they serve the customer. Maybe a particular airline and a particular hotel chain do a deal together where if you fly this plane and stay at this hotel, right, you get a discount, right, that you wouldn't normally get, right? Or they give ancillary offers like, okay, again, attendance at a sporting event or free ground transfers or something like that. So there are many, many things that you can think about, but all of this ties really back into kind of the growing complexity of the information space around travel and how we can make that easier to manage so that these new opportunities can actually come to life.
That was a really detailed response, and you're right that a lot of these things are very well poised to be the future of technology, especially the thing that you mentioned about paperless travel. Because the one thing I think I might remember most from maybe my childhood or whatever is my mother just being like, "Are your passports in the right place? Don't forget your boarding pass and your passports. This
Yep.
is."
Exactly.
be casual with your travel documents. So insane to imagine a world where people will have a completely different experience and a lesser stressful travel experience in business and personal pleasure, etc.
That's right.
Yeah. Joe, thank you so much for this conversation. What an enlightening conversation about an industry that is probably running a lot of major aspects in the world, but that people always just look at the thing that they experience, that is just getting on the flight and taking off, and then the back end that makes the magic possible. You introduced me to that, and it's been a pleasure to get to know everything that Sabre is doing to create this win-win situation for the flyers and the airlines, and especially so that everyone has a great experience. So thank you so much.
And thank you very much, Joe.